All right, guys, Brandon again. As promised, a second video tonight. I'll probably skip doing a video tomorrow, but another series or another Facebook Live actually, very similar to the project that we just got done doing earlier this evening, where we used a watercolor technique using just regular markers. For the first time on video, you guys saw me using just regular Crayola markers. I'm going to use a little bit different marker this time. These are also very common. These are the ones that I'm using are made by Papermate. They're called a flare tip marker. Mom and Dad might actually even have some laying around. So if they do, you might ask if you can borrow one. If not, you can use Crayola markers, but you'll want to use like the real fine tip, like the skinny Crayola markers if you've got them. Colored pencils could work too, but they won't probably give us the same watercolor effect. So you'll still be able to do the same drawing with the rest of us, but you may not get the watercolor effect using colored pencils. So again, just another marker drawing tonight, but just trying to expand what we're able to do with common everyday art supplies that most of us have. So what we're going to do, let's talk about supplies first. I've got another piece of paper taped down to the back of a sketch pad. It's another smaller sheet of paper. It's a little bit bigger than my postcards, but still not as big as a full drawing paper size. It's a thick, like a cardstock, like my sketch paper. It's just a different size paper. I always like to work off the thicker stuff, just because with the markers, with the water, that kind of stuff, you want your paper to really hold up well. Again, I also like to use smooth surface paper. I think far more important than the markers or pens and pencils that you're using is making sure that you get good quality paper. Now for these projects, you can use whatever you've got at home. That's fine. If you want to pursue doing some, higher level art projects, if you really just enjoy doing art and you really want to see where you can go with it, paper is the best place to start. Make sure you're getting the kind of paper that you need for the kind of job that you're going to do. If you're working in dry media, sketch paper or regular drawing pads are fantastic. If you're going to do markers and stuff like that with wet media, you'll want something that keeps your ink from bleeding through the page to the pages underneath it, but also spreading across the page when you don't want it to. We're going to kind of force our markers to do that today anyway. We're going to try to make them bleed, but we want them to bleed across the top instead of through the paper. We want them to go across the top of the paper and then dry there like that. Basic supplies, we're going to bring back our pencil that we've used in all the other projects. Again, I always use a 6H pencil when I've got one available. If you don't, a number 2 pencil like you use for your schoolwork will do fine. Just make sure that you're making your lines real light so that they're easy to erase, or so that they don't show through the marker when we get to that part. Just like the last project that we did, we're going to bring in this new guy. We didn't use him on any of the other projects that we've done so far prior to tonight. Just a regular plain paintbrush. Nothing too exciting about it, no frills, just whatever you've got probably in your arts and crafts kits will do just fine. If you've got one in a tray of watercolors, borrow that one for a little bit. Again, doesn't have to be a real high quality paintbrush. I've also got a small cup of water. I use like a cough medicine cup because it doesn't take a lot of water for the projects that we're doing. So far we've got a pencil, a paintbrush, a small cup of water. I didn't tell you guys to grab paper towels the last time, so make sure that you've got paper towels in case we get ahead of ourselves with the water. We want to make sure that we're able to soak some of that back up. And then here is the catch to tonight's project. because I always have to challenge you guys with what we're doing, completely different style. I want you to pick out from your fine tip markers, whatever you're using, one color, just one. Actually, let's make it two, because we might need a complementary color. So if you use blue like I'm going to use, let's see, I'll use like this purple also. So they're kind of in the same family. They're kind of closely related. You could do like yellow and orange, or orange and red, light green and dark green, blue and purple, light pink and dark pink, whatever you want to do. Just make sure that they're kind of closely related. And just two colors, that's all we're going to do. And so I'm going to go ahead and get ready to get started with sketching my picture, kind of keeping with the theme of kind of the water and all that kind of stuff. I want to paint or draw and then kind of do a watercolor paint style of maybe like a lake in here with a little bit of like a mountain range going on over here, something like that. And then maybe like a shore, maybe like a sandy shore or something like that. And then maybe we'll do like a wooden rowboat or something like that, kind of here, kind of parked on the bank, and we'll do like a little wave there or something like that. So that's why I picked blue for mine, because it's just got that nice cool tone. It's calming, relaxing, just like being able to kind of look out over a lake or the ocean or something like that. So first line that I'm gonna make, let's say about 1/3 of the way down my page. Super soft line there, because that's kind of the far distant, we're looking all the way across the lake at this, so that line's going to be almost non-existent when we get kind of into the marker work. That being said, I'm going to start, soft pencil lines, do like a little section landmass there, and then I'll bring another one in, and I'll bring that one all the way down to the water. So this one's going to be further in the background than this one. Just kind of making it interesting for our viewers, when they go to look at our artwork, it gives them lots of cool things where they're not just looking at just a boat sitting on the water in the middle of the page. Or maybe you've drawn a picture of a house and then you and your brothers and sisters and mom and dad out to the side, but everything is kind of in the same plane. Everything is all just right there in the front together. And so we're going to do a boat in the front and kind of a lake in the middle, and then kind of these like landforms that are kind of coming all the way down into the lake, and they're in the background. And even further back than that, we'll do the sky, and we'll do some kind of cool stuff there to kind of hint that maybe there's some clouds back there too. So pulling this landform back there, and then I'll bring another one, just kind of funky shapes, It doesn't have to be, a certain set way. We know that mountains aren't just a series of, points like that. So just do some kind of loose lines there. And maybe I'll make this one actually come out further into the water than like these guys, right? So they're kind of out there like that. And then this one kind of comes out. Maybe it's got a little island where they're not actually, they're connected, but maybe there's a little channel of water that runs through there. And then just kind of an interesting line here. We don't know where it ends up or where it goes from there. We just know that it kind of frames in our lake a little bit. That being said, I'm going to kind of bring kind of a sweeping line, kind of like that. Again, real soft. Kind of something like that. Now, drawing the boat, that's always kind of an interesting thing. I'm going to do kind of a shape like that. And then I'm going to bring kind of that main beam there. And then this is going to be kind of a triangle shape here with a dented in side there. And this is going to be, again, and they kind of look like Doritos or something. I don't know. Whatever you see. And then connecting the sides like that. And then maybe put a bench in there, something like that. Again, I'm making my lines all nice and soft because it's all going to be done in marker anyway. This is just to help me as the artist kind of see for sure where I'm going to put stuff. And I'm going to kind of, I don't know, maybe the guy or girl that got out of this boat kind of had to pull it up on their own, so they kind of drug it through the sand there a little bit, so maybe there's a little bit of sand dune there, something like that. We don't want that boat to be so far out there in the water that it, you know, kind of drifts off as the tide comes up, right? So we'll do that. And then there'll be kind of some shadows in there from the boat, because I'm going to have my light source like out over here somewhere shining. Okay, so just like we did on the sunflower thing, kind of hint at some kind of lines out here somewhere. When I do like sand dunes, I like to make kind of like a wave. And they can go kind of both directions there. And I do that so that I can kind of shade that area in kind of behind it a little bit. Something like that. Nothing real set in stone yet, right? We don't ever know where our lines are going to be until we get there. So that's kind of the general outline here. I know that I want this one back here to kind of be the darkest, and then this one, you know, maybe only about like that. And then this one we start seeing more detail, so I might do some like cutouts. Shade, of course, that side because the landform there is in front of that. But you remember from the bird drawing, I think it was, we talked a little bit about continuous line drawings, and when we do get our markers out, we'll do some continuous line drawings in here to put some details in. Kind of a little cove there maybe. And then, I don't know, maybe just kind of an interesting line there, something like that. And then we'll shade that in. Kind of the same thing here. And then I think I'm gonna have kind of some clouds here in this area, maybe going that way, maybe another one, kind of like fog rolling in off of the lake. Kind of a nice peaceful morning where you can kind of hear yourself think. Get out there and, you know, the fog's still kind of lifting off the water. And then with our markers, we'll kind of come in here and put some just, you know, gentle waves in there. Just maybe the air stirring just a little bit. And then up here, we'll do kind of where the tide is just kind of breaking on the beach and kind of melting the sand away kind of thing. This, of course, down here will be shaded in because that's kind of underneath the bench there. And then maybe just a real simple paddle, which is just kind of a rectangle down here with rounded corners, and then a handle. And then I guess we better do the other one. Maybe that one got kind of tossed in the boat a little bit better than the one propped up against it. And then here on the boat, maybe make a little bit of a lip there. And then hint at some lines for the boards. So kind of the rough outline there of our drawing. Putting the pencil away for now and getting out my marker. Again, I'm using a flare tip pen, or it's a flare pen. It's a felt tip pen by Papermate. Lots of companies make them. It's a water-based ink, so just like the Crayola markers, it will smear or it can be dissolved, kind of is a better way to describe it, with water. I don't have fine tip Crayola markers not here at the house, so these actually work out well too. They'll kind of do the same thing. They might actually even bleed a little bit more than the Crayola markers do. And I'm going to start kind of back here, and just like all the other drawings, it doesn't have to be exact, just kind of an interesting line to look at. You know, there's not a lot of things in nature that are just plain old straight lines, so if you have kind of a few more nooks and crannies in your landform than I do, great. It makes it nice and interesting to look at. And then kind of along the water's edge there. And we're just kind of basically just kind of dragging our marker across. I let mine kind of do a lot of the work for me. I let it kind of decide kind of where it's going to go. I just kind of guide it and where I would like the lines to go, but I hold the marker real kind of loose compared to how I hold markers for when I'm doing other more detailed stuff. Because all this stuff, you know, it's way out there. You know, we can't tell. The older you get, the less you can tell about it anyway. But kind of like we talked about with the bird drawing, you know, we don't want those things real in focus. We want it to look like we were taking a picture of the boat sitting here on the bank, and all that stuff just happens to be in the background, and it's cool that it's there. Kind of tells us a little bit about the scene, about, you know, what the boat's doing there, instead of just a boat floating out in space by itself. But again, we're not going to concentrate a lot of energy or information and details that, for one thing, you wouldn't be able to see in real life, but things that would be distracting or take away from what we're trying to show in our actual drawing. So for my shaded areas, I'm just using a series of parallel lines. They can be diagonal, they can be vertical, kind of however you want them. I like them to be close together, because we're going to give ourselves some ink to work with when we get our paintbrush and water out. We want to have a lot of ink in those areas. We're just trying to add what they call density or depth. Again, just kind of following where those lines go. Gonna put some over here. And as I get from one landform to the next, I just make sure that I have more shaded area. And we're kind of doing the same thing that we did With the very first picture that we worked on together, the one that we call gradients, we're working dark into light because it's further away, it's more intense, it's less detailed, and just kind of working with that. And these land masses that are near the water, I want to say that maybe as the tide moves, the water kind of washes up on the rocks and then kind of bounces off and creates little tides. They're just little lines that show kind of motion in the water there. Going back to that idea about the continuous lines, just doing some interesting effects here. Trying to not pick the marker up. Kind of hard to do when you get used to working fast with art. You kind of want to get in the habit of picking the marker up quick and moving on to the next kind of thing there. A lot of people talk about doing stuff like art to get your mind off things, you know, as though it's like a thoughtless kind of thing. The truth is, it uses a different part of your brain than like your math classes and your English classes and all that stuff use. You know, those are all very precise and carefully orchestrated. You got to spend a lot of thought in doing those kinds of things, and then you use kind of the more creative side of your brain. And so when I leave work, you know, I'm pretty exhausted, you know, mentally and stuff like that from what I do. And then when I come home, you know, and after we've had dinner and you know, family time and activities and stuff like that, I spend a lot of time doing art. And it's not that I'm doing art and not thinking about stuff. It's just I get to kind of exhaust the other side of my brain. You know, I like to think of it as trying to stay balanced, you know, with equal sides and efforts. And so when I'm drawing, you know, I'm continuously kind of thinking about where do I want to put, you know, lines, where would this make sense, where would this kind of help the viewer understand what it is that I'm trying to show. Right now I'm just putting in, I don't want to put a lot in my drawing. You can put more in if you want, but my lake's kind of a peaceful place to be. And so just a few little small lines there, and I'm doing that by kind of making like a little small TP shape and then a flat line underneath it. Maybe just a couple dots and dashes here and there. And so that's kind of what we're doing to fill out that space there. I'm going to probably just go ahead and try to put some lines in here for where my clouds are going to go. I like for those lines to be kind of a little softer, fluffier looking than the hard lines of the landforms. They're very thick clouds that are kind of out there. Kind of disappears down into the water there. And then I'll use some vertical lines and stuff like that to give myself some ink to put into the sky there. But not just yet. Okay, so I'm going to start out by drawing this paddle because it's kind of more in the foreground than the boat. So I want to make sure that its lines get the preference there. I don't want to accidentally draw the boat and then have to figure out a way to make it look like the paddle's not coming through the boat. It's kind of the same thing here. And I kind of work kind of heavier on one side. That side's picking up light, so this side's kind of shadowed. That side's picking up light, this side is shadowed. Kind of old paddles, kind of make them look kind of weathered. And then we'll pick up kind of the heavier lines on the boat. So again, heavier line down here on the underneath because there's going to be a shadow under there. And then I'm going to actually go ahead and work those sand dune lines in there where the boat's kind of secured. And then just some more of those little hatching lines. This doesn't have to be super exact. We don't want big gaps between the boards because then the boat would probably leak, right? But I do want to hint that it's, you know, made out of wooden slats. And then we'll do some stuff in there to kind of detail that out here in just a little bit. But just kind of putting our basic lines in there for right now. This is probably going to be the darkest point on the whole drawing. You know, it's completely protected from sunlight by the bench there in the position that I've got my light source. So I'm going to use that as my point of reference for the rest of the drawing when I go for my shading of things. Nothing should be darker than that area at any point in time. Sometimes you would refer to that as your black point, but I'm not using a black marker, so I guess that term's probably not entirely accurate in this case, but kind of the inside of the boat there, it's probably going to be shadowed a little bit. And then let's kind of deal with that wave a little bit because there'll be a wave on this side of the boat too. Something kind of like that. So again, here in these dunes, not entirely a lot different than what I did for the waves, where I kind of come up to a kind of a teepee, but maybe a little bit of a softer one there. And then sometimes I'll do kind of a partial line underneath it. Remember, the light's coming from this side, so there'll be a little bit of a shadow in the dune over here. Teepee. Shadow on this side. Okay. So maybe some lines over here, because this side of the boat's going to be more shaded than this side, because this side's on the light side, this side's on the darker side. We don't necessarily want to go overboard with our lines because we haven't seen exactly how the water's going to spread our ink. We hope that it does a lot. Kind of get that nice watercolor effect. And then kind of down here, there might be, you know, a dune here and there, but not very many, because this is where the water's breaking on the shore. So if you've ever been to the beach, you'll know that when you get real close to the water, it's real smooth down there. And then it's kind of as close to scribbling as you'll see me get there. I just know that I want this front edge of the, where the water is breaking on the shore, I want it to be kind of a dark area. You know, the water's kind of curling over a little bit. And then we'll do some lines kind of like this that show that it's pulling back some of the shore with it. Lots of things that we can do with just real simple line gestures. And do some of those circles that we've been doing on lots of ours. Maybe they're seashells or rocks that are in there. And maybe do some tide lines here. Kind of shows that the water's alive there, right? It's got some movement to it. Another thing I'd like to do, maybe with like this rock form and this one, can't do a whole lot with this one back here, but maybe kind of hint at, you can see the reflection of it in the water. And the best way to do that is it will appear darker on the water side than it will out in the sunlight side. Something kind of like that, and then we'll use our water and we'll sweep that out this way. So kind of for the most part, we've got our first layer of our first color on. I told you guys that we could do 2 colors on this one, just so we can kind of get comfortable with, you know, using less is more. So I'm just going to kind of go with this purple color, kind of over the blue in some areas, like here in the shadowed areas. Maybe like a shadow of the paddle there going up on the boat. And ideally, when we use the water to get our watercolor effect, these colors will kind of blend together, the blue and the purple, or the dark pink and the light pink, or the greens, or whatever families that you chose to work in. Maybe they'll kind of work together and give you a lot of interesting color play going on with your picture. kind of a tough idea to get your head around the first time or two that you do this, where you try to do a whole picture of things that would all be different colors, but just limiting yourself to just, you know, maybe the only color marker that you could find. And so you'd express everything that way. I did a project one time. It was a portrait of a person, and it was all done in all just blue marker. And that was hard to do, you know, because I haven't seen very many blue people other than the Smurfs. And trying to get your head wrapped around, you learn more about textures and shadows and things like that. You know, you focus more on those types of things than you do on, you know, getting so wrapped up in, is this the right color for their hair or their eyes? You just really work on adding some detail to the pictures. Just kind of a neat exercise. It's always kind of stood out in my head as a great way to kind of learn a lot of stuff as a young artist. Just kind of forces you to think outside of the way that you normally think, which is kind of what art is all about, right? And so kind of out here in the water too, I'll kind of hint at some purples out there. Maybe bring back one of those ideas that we talked about on that first video with our gradient, where I'll bring this color kind of all the way down, and then I'll go back with my blue a little bit. Fill in some of this space. So kind of the dark and the medium and the light as we come forward. And then let's put a couple of lines out here. And see what that does with our paintbrush and water, which is what I'm switching to right now. So yeah, these markers or pens or whatever you want to call them really give that watercolor effect quite easily. Might have to be careful to not overdo it with water here, but again, just kind of letting it do what it wants to do. The edges of my clouds, I don't want them to be real hard edges, so if I pull ink from them, that's all right. Just kind of helps blend. Go ahead and do that all the way down. Okay. So then let's kind of do the same thing with our land mass, following the edge there, kind of letting it bleed down this way some. We'll pick up some of the ink from that, kind of follow that all the way down. Gonna do the same thing here. And leaves a nice little highlight there. Same thing there. Kind of see how the blues and purples get along with those pens and markers. They blend pretty good. And I'm just moving my hand just kind of as straight as I can back and forth because I want my water line there to kind of stay kind of smooth. And then here at the wave, I'm going to brush kind of upward like that. So then it kind of looks kind of like a splash maybe. Down here on the sandy area, I don't want to fill it in as smoothly as I did the water. You know, it's not all continuous water into sand. I still want to leave, you know, a lot of the highlights in the sand because it's picking up some sunlight. We want to hint at it, the shadows and stuff, but we don't necessarily want all of our picture just to run together as one thing. So that's kind of the idea that I'm trying to keep here, is to find a good balance between how much blending and how much to leave that white like that. This side maybe not as much because it's kind of in the shade. Kind of make that a little smoother if we want. Trying to go around the paddle there. And we still have the benefit of our white gel pens or white colored pencils or white out correction pens and things like that. If we need to go back and touch some of this stuff up, we've used those before on some of our other pictures. So if we want to, you know, add highlights to things here and there, we can. We don't want to overdo it because the whole idea of this particular project that we're working on is, you know, just using just the very basic tools that we have available to us and working, you know, in kind of singular colors and that kind of stuff. Now, if I remember on some of these projects like this, once you've gotten them wet and then activated that ink run and they set again, they typically don't keep smearing around for you. They kind of settle down after that. So just like here, that nice kind of cloudy effect, that'll stay like that even if I get it wet again. It doesn't keep changing, which is, you know, kind of a nice thing. All right, so kind of got that going. All right, so right now the drawing probably looks kind of like a big mess in mine. Blue, you know, we've lost a lot of the detail that we put in with the markers when we were drawing it. So I'm going to go ahead and pat it dry. And you can see I used kind of such a little amount of water here and there that I'm really not getting much ink back off the page. It's actually kind of soaked in and dissipated. So I'm gonna go back to my original blue marker and put some of my detail lines back in there. Not a lot of them, because I like the softer effect that this has, you know, these watercolor effects, but you know, if I want to go back in and put some of this texture and stuff like that, I can. It's different than some of the other art that I do where, you know, most of my stuff's known for having, you know, real bold, bright colors and dark black outlines around everything. And this is just all done just in one color of blue and one color of purple. Maybe kind of come in here and scribble in a couple of evergreen trees out there. Some of them can be a little more sparse than others. I'm gonna go out in different angles. Of course, if I do any out here, you know, I want them to be, you know, a little smaller guys than the ones that I've got up here because they're further away. And just going back through and sharpening up some lines. All right, dots and dashes with little teepees there. All right, we'll darken this area too. So we've got nice soft lines in our clouds, and we've got harder lines with the landforms, darker in the back, lighter here in the front. Same thing with the water gradients, just like we talked about the first series that we did. I'm going to highlight a little bit of the boat because it's a feature piece of the artwork. I might you know, do a couple areas of foam, you know, where the water kind of foams up when it breaks on the shore there. Really just kind of a neat, kind of a, something you might see like in a dream or something like that. Just soft flowing lines and stuff. What I'm using, this is also by Uniball. It's a Signo, it's a white pigment ink gel pen. There's all kinds of gel pens out there. This is the one that I like to use because it's got a real smooth flowing ink. I know I didn't tell you guys to get this out at the beginning. You definitely don't have to. White colored pencils will work, but I'd give this time, a little more time to dry if you do that, or even like a whiteout pen will do the job. Really just trying to help make some of these things kind of stand back out that we lost in the watercolor effect there. But you know, this is a great thing that you can do if you don't have a kit of watercolors. Honestly, when I do watercolors, I actually use, you know, the 88-cent whatever, you know, comes with 8 colors. I've got, you know, nicer watercolor paints, you know, that come in tubes and stuff. But for the most part, I usually just use, you know, the cheap stuff. It works for my purposes and what it is that I'm trying to do. And, you know, they're good to have. But if you don't have, you know, a watercolor kit or whatever, you can just take the regular markers that you have and just, you know, accent some colors in there and then just use a little bit of water on a brush, and you can really make those kind of go out real far. I got to sign my little piece of artwork here. I am going to switch over to a black marker for that, just so that it doesn't get completely lost. All right, BW for me. And again, thank you guys for tuning in and doing artwork with me. As always, send me pictures in the comments or in a text, and I'd love to see what you guys were able to come up with doing our very minimal color palette watercolor marker drawings. So again, just like always, send me pictures and let me know how you guys are enjoying doing these little art projects with me.